Welcome to the Human Evolution Podcast, where we dive deep into the science, philosophies, and strategies that create real and lasting change. I'm OriGoldstein, and here we leave traditional self-help behind and map the real terrain of true personal development.
So one of the things I do kind of regret from coming out of that retreat after being out of the normal life for 12 days, basically all the protein was, my body was a deficit of that because it was all vegan food or whatever it was. Great food, but just not a lot of protein in that food in the retreat. And then no caffeine, no medications, nothing like that. So one of the small regrets I have, because I have such a heavy caffeine drinker, and a lot of it's just a habit because I'm sitting in places and I'm like, well, I should have coffee. I'm here. Even a cappuccino, which is basically just watered down and milk, but there's caffeine in there. And I kind of wish I'd stuck to not being so aggressive with the caffeine when I came back out, because they say it takes like 9 days for it to completely get out of your system. But it's kind of like alcohol. It is a drug and everybody does it. Nobody thinks twice about it, but it really is, something.
I think we've discussed it. Like, it's my favorite thing is I just have cacao, which has, I think it's like a 10th the amount of caffeine in it. And I like it for the taste. It's really nice. And most coffee shops have some kind of hot chocolate or something like that, or just an herbal tea. And I'm just avoiding caffeine as much as possible because I know that if I go down that path, it's so easy to get into it. But weirdly enough for me, caffeine, if I have it in the morning by 3 p.m., I've got the biggest crash.
That happens to most people. That's the problem I've had as well. Should point out to the listeners and viewers that when we were in Arkansas, you ordered a non-dirty chai, which essentially is a regular chai. It's a regular chai. I didn't even know what a dirty chai was.
I first of all want to mention the fact that right before that, 2 dirty chais were ordered, so it made perfect sense that I went in with a non-dirty. I'm just saying. Yes.
Yeah, that actually does make sense because I can see them screwing that up.
I will have a dirty chai. I will have a non-dirty chai. Thank you very much.
Non-dirty chai. Yeah, pristine. I want a pristine chai. Well, speaking of that trip, we had a really good time. We were up there working on stuff for the Shift community, partnered up with Human Evolution Movement. We had a in-person gathering. We've done this a couple of times now. The first one wasn't probably as productive as it could have been because we went back down to your neck of the woods where I used to live, and there was just so much to do. We were on the beach at that nice hotel in Fort Lauderdale, and I've got some old bad habits there. It's the people I wanted to see. Now we got a lot done, but we're still like, okay, happy hour, let's go, which was a blast. Don't get me wrong. So this time around, I was like, okay, we'll keep a little more dialed in, and it actually ended up being extremely productive. With the technology these days, with what we're doing now, having these screens where we can talk to each other and share things and everything else, and having just the access, or if I need something, I can just tag you on my phone, like, hey, dude, check this out real quick. I mean, that is phenomenal. But I really still kind of surprises me of how much just being in person, you can get things done that before would have taken, forever. Just little adjustments here and there. And I think that gets lost on people a lot these days because COVID obviously made us make the switch. And I'm not suggesting we go back to people being in offices or commuting or anything like that. The world is not going that direction. That's foolish. But I do think there's some value in whether you're working with people or just people you don't see that often. There is no substitute for in-person things, even if you're FaceTiming and everything else, because the things we were able to point out, and then we were able to relax. And then if hey, let's go eat, let's try something new. And obviously, look, we're privileged to be able to go do these things. Not everybody has the extra revenue around to say, hey, let's get the whole team together and go on a trip. So we understand that. I think that if anybody has the opportunity to, no matter what line of work you're in, just get people together and go do something. I'll let you expand on that. But I think it was a great time, man.
I completely agree. And I love something about there's something to be said about energy just being infectious. It's something that when you're around people on a Zoom call or something like that, you can definitely get some kind of a feel for it. But when you're around other people, if something in your brain is like, you know what, I don't want to focus in on it right now, but then the other person is excited, you finally find that little bit of extra little push inside of yourself to get it going. And there's something really, really powerful about that. It's for me, a lot of the people, for example, Joe Dispenza, we've mentioned him multiple times. You can definitely do a Joe Dispenza course online, but it is a million times different when you're there and you're surrounded by 1,000 other people that are all there for the same purpose. I felt the same with Tony Robbins. Or we had mentioned at the beginning of this thing, I'm guessing that's going to be cut out, but the Vipassana retreat. All in all, you're just sitting there meditating. You don't really need to go somewhere for that. But when you're in the energy of other people doing it and you're in that environment, everything changes. It's just, I absolutely love it. And we got so much done in Bentonville together in that way. And maybe it helps in the fact that we were in Bentonville, Arkansas, of all places. The birthplace of Walmart. But being together and just constantly pushing each other and thinking about something else. And then hey, can you come and look at this? There was something really powerful about it. I love it.
Absolutely. And I even equate it to like I go to the gym. I have my own gym membership. I go by myself and I think I'm getting a decent workout in, but some days I'm like, I'm just kind of done. But I've been doing more group classes lately. Same concept. I go in there. I don't even think about stopping. It doesn't even cross my mind. And then we're done. Before, if you sent me into any gym with a list of things I needed to do, I'm like, maybe, And I was just I was surprised at myself for how much I'd forgotten how valuable that kind of time is. And again, of course, we were in Bentonville, Arkansas, we were both very impressed when we got there.
Pleasantly
Ori and I
surprised.
we got into town. I was like, wow, because it is the home of Walmart. I think he actually started his first business was not too far from there. That was where he made like the real first big store, Sam Walton did. And the town is really small, has a little town square and everything. And it's all very walkable. We had a nice Airbnb. We walked. The Airbnb we were in there arguably would be thousands of dollars per night anywhere else. I mean, it was just a massive house, fireplace, all this fancy stuff. Again, I'm talking about how good we had it, but we did. It was awesome. We could
We had it
walk
pretty
places.
good. It was pretty darn wonderful.
Yeah, didn't have a hot tub though. That's going in the fucking review. But yeah, but it was a great place, and just having the right balance of coffee shops, restaurants, things to do. I'm gonna have to title this somehow, something about Bentonville, so people watch it. Yeah, watch it. That'll get people's attention. But it really was nice. Now I could also make the argument that hey, if we try to go to Vegas, or even though I don't gamble, but if we try to go to Vegas or somewhere else, I could see things being less productive depending upon the locale. But what a great thing. So that leads us back to just in generally speaking, have you run into clients that have had loneliness issues or things like that have just been on their screens? I know we talked about social media and mobile devices a little bit earlier this year. But I would imagine that this all feels it feels like it's striking home a little bit more after we just had this experience. I'm like, shit, this whole time I've been talking to people through screens and kind of not realizing what I'm missing, right?
I think that there's so much more to that. And I think we've actually covered this multiple times in the past, but like to me, it's such a big thing. And the fact that like when you're talking to someone on the screen, you're seeing the best moments of their time or them at their highest energy because they feel that they need to be that way. And then you finish off your time and you think that that is the way they are 24/7. And you start judging yourself in some crazy ways and sit there going like, how come I don't have that energy? And so a lot of my clients, what I'm beginning to see very often with my clients is the fact that they're comparing their everyday, their moment to moment of their everyday to everyone else's highlights. And they're sitting there saying like, why is something wrong in my life? Like, why is my life not like that? And it's a matter of having them like just readjust their view on things and to understand the fact that that influencer that you're following, understand the fact that they also woke up and felt bloated that morning or whatever it was. There's nothing too special about what's going on with them. They just don't put that part on camera. Whereas you see every moment of your life and you think that this is unnormal. And so that to me is a really, really big thing. Other than that, just the concept of like, I mean, when you are around people in person, like we said, that energy is infectious. There's something really powerful about it. When you're by yourself, you can sometimes get stuck in your own head, in your own little loops, and you just don't get out of it. Sometimes it's really good to have that shift in energy that someone else just pulls you away from what you were thinking before.
I often wonder that now with like how many times, or like it's given me quote unquote permission to not go home as much. And I'm speaking in terms of like family and everything else, but with Facebook and which is like the big one to keep track of, see what people are doing. Like there's so many times now where like, I wonder what so-and-so is doing. I'll just like, oh, okay, I got it. Okay, I know what they're doing. I don't check in with people as much anymore. And, for those of us that have a lot going on, we talk to people all day long. It's not that big of a deal, but I can imagine if a person doesn't have that many close friends, and males are guilty of this about just kind of going through their day, or their friend group is through their wives or girlfriends or whatever. That's kind of what's led to this whole loneliness problem we have in the country now too. So, I mean, we are mammals, right? Like we're supposed to be places. That's part of the reason, besides the fact I just love beer in general, but a lot of the reason I like to go to like happy hour, sit at bars, or even work in a cafe, is just the communal thing. Like just like sometimes I'll take my computer and I'll go sit at one of the pubs over here, which is arguably not healthy, but just having people sitting there that I'm not even talking to, it just feels better. Just the energy.
But now I want to talk about that. Like there's a few different places my mind went about this, but the one thing that comes up for me is my personal energy is such that when I'm in a communal atmosphere, I forced myself when I was in Arkansas to really, really focus on stuff. But if I'm in a communal atmosphere and I'm around people I like, and we've discussed this, I get nothing done. It's just one of those things that like I used to go to a lot of co-working places. And what happened was the first 3 weeks I was there, I got so much done. But then I started knowing Joe. And then when I got there, like I'd walk up to Joe and I'd be like, hey man, what's going on? And then, well, I had to find out what's going on with Sarah because like, I mean, like that, I had to finish up the story from yesterday. And before I know it, I've been talking to people for 2.5 hours, got nothing done. And then I'm like sitting down trying to get stuff done and I'm just rushing through things. So for me, one of my things was I actually moved away from those kind of communal atmospheres because it definitely, it fed too much into my need to have people around me. But I think that there's a balance there. And this is the other thing I was talking about the fact that you can't just swing the pendulum in only one direction. So then you stay home and you only at home. And then all of a sudden, after a while, you start feeling kind of lonely and bored. So I think for me, I'm just trying to find like that happy place of like being around people to some degree, but not being around people so much that I'm not getting anything done.
It's kind of like everybody kind of has to adhere to some form of etiquette. The co-working thing I've experienced before. I'm in a co-working place now, and I don't know anybody here yet. And I do see, like when I was in Lakeland, Florida last year about this time, I think I got to know everybody in that place because everybody was very interesting to me. And then it was the same thing, same problem I used to have in my old office. You walk in, and I just stop by every cubicle, say hi to everybody. I'm like, oh crap, I'm not getting anything done. So I do get that. It's almost like people just need to. And look, not everybody's going to know these things. They're all strangers, but you almost have to have some type of etiquette in places like that, where like you check in with somebody, then we all go to our corners and shut the f up and kind of do our own thing, which is tough.
I mean, it sounds like it's something that works, but like it just tends to just be some kind of a problem. And my logic is just that you have to somehow, on some level inside of your own mind, figure out who it is that you really are. And that to me is basically the foundations of human evolution movement, right? You have to really know who it is that you are and what works best for you, and then work to your strengths. So for me, the idea of working at home most of my time tends to work out very well, but then I'm on WhatsApp a lot and I'm commenting to people and I'm on Zoom doing things because I'm talking to clients. And then it's during the weekend, I specifically want to go out. I want to be around other people. It's finding that balance for yourself about what works best for you. But I also know, and we've discussed this a few times, the concept of like, I know myself to be an introvert that is extroverted. So I find that like it's when I'm around people, I'm very extrovert and I really, really like it. But then after being around them for a long time, I kind of feel very drained because that's the introvert inside of me that actually needs time to be kind of like just get my energy back. Whereas I believe you and Brittany, for example, are very high extroverts, in which case when you're around people, when you leave, you feel absolutely wonderful. You just got energized. And so it's kind of like just the more you know yourself, the better off things are.
Usually pretty energized. It depends how much Tito's I have. That saps some energy. This is not a sponsorship. This podcast is not sponsored by Tito's, although it should be. But yeah, I know what you mean. And everybody has their own pattern. Everybody has we talked about sleep patterns and everything else. So you kind of have to know yourself, and then other people have to be okay with that. So for example, I have most of my energy first thing in the morning, but I like to go to bed very early. Some people I know, barring any caffeine injections, will kind of crash mid-afternoon. Like my energy gets worse towards the end of the day. And that's kind of the time that I want to go out to happy hour and see people because I've sequestered myself during the day and gotten work done. Now I'm free to go out and everything else. And some people, and this is a real thing, I forget, Matt Walker, the guy who wrote the book, Why We Sleep, I think, he's mentioned the 3 different types. There's those that are super early birds, which might be me. Those that are okay getting up at like 5 in the morning and going all day, which I do. I wish I didn't, but it's just my thing. And then those that get up like 8 or 9, and then those, I think, like you're like a late. Like if you were barring no other things going on in the world, you would probably sleep in a little bit, but then you have energy and focus into the late hours. So you have to know that about yourself as well.
Absolutely. And we mentioned this in Arkansas, but for like my natural pattern is I'm happy to wake up between like 8 and 10 a.m. just very naturally. But then I can just keep going, have a lot of energy until 3 a.m. the next day. I tend to not do that very much because I still like my 7 to 9 hours of sleep, whatever it is. But to me, that works perfectly, perfectly well. But now, for example, I'm dating Joy, and Joy is very much a morning person. And I can't tell you how many Sundays she wakes up and like it's like I'm so happily asleep at 7 a.m. and she's like, "You up yet? You up yet?" And I'm sitting there going like, "I love you, but if you do this again, I'm gonna have to strangle you." But the whole thing is like, as soon as you get to know this about yourself, and the thing that I'm really getting at here is the biggest thing is kind of like just that know thyself thing. I remember myself as a kid trying to fit into a box that I just didn't fit into. That I was like, do you know what? I'm going to wake up and exercise at 4 a.m. because that is what biohackers tell you to do. And if you do it for long enough, it's going to be the right thing for you and you're going to change your cycles. And all I did was manage to mess up my body in crazy ways. And like we discussed before we got onto this conversation was, and then I got addicted to caffeine and I just blew out my adrenals in crazy ways because I was just doing everything I could to wake up at 4 a.m. because that's what's right for me. And the whole idea here, the whole thing that really made a big shift for me, that really, really created human evolution movement in a big way is as soon as you really and truly know who you authentically are and you play to your strengths in every single way, shape, and form, everything works out for you perfectly well. The whole challenge is trying to fit into a box that was painted for you by someone else. And that's where everything tends to break.
Being able to convey that as well. Like, hey, I know this is who I am, and being able to tell your friends and family that, and then them being able to accept it. And this comes with age, I think, but it's like very foreign. To me, like, let's say when I was 25, if we were hanging out and you would have been like, I just don't like getting up earlier. I'm like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Like, what's wrong with you? Just like if you try to get me to stay awake past midnight, there's no way. I'd be a total zombie, right?
Yeah. And that's it. It's like, I mean, as a child, you're told to kind of like just listen to authority, right? And so like when school or your parents tell you wake up at this time, and I get it. I mean, if you've got to be at school at 7 a.m., you got to wake up before 7 a.m. to get there. If you have to be at a job at 7:30 a.m., you got to wake up at a certain time to get there. I get that. And so you can't really play around with those things too much. But at the same time, at least when you start to understand yourself, you start to actually understand the things you can do to start shifting around that as much as possible. Maybe that means sleeping later on the weekends and saying, I deserve this. Or maybe that's a matter of not burning the candle at both ends and waking up at 6 a.m. and then also trying to be the night owl that you know yourself to be and going to sleep at 2 a.m. It's kind of like coming up with that balance that fits into your world as much as possible. And in my truth, the thing that really worked for me was eventually changing up my world. And it's a very weird thing, but you can actually get there where you can change up your world to suit you. Where, I mean, originally, like when I had a job, I had to be at the office at 9 a.m. until all of a sudden one time I stopped showing up at the office and I was convinced I was going to be fired. But weirdly enough, like it's my boss kind of was like, I guess we'll see if we can make this work. And this was pre-COVID. And and then COVID happened and everyone kind of followed suit. But like, I was the first person that did it. I just remember that phone call that he was like, are you ever going to come into the office again? And I was like, I don't think so. It's like, this works better for me. Do you see me being less productive or do you see me being more productive? It was like, well, I guess you're being more productive. I was like, then let's give this a try, shall we? And it's when you have that little bit of guts inside of yourself to say, I'm going to take this and I'm going to do what's right for me, that you see that the world around you doesn't collapse and people tend to be very, very willing to work.
As long as you're getting your productivity is getting done, you're answering your calls when you're supposed to. I mean, I worked in a cubicle in office for 20 years, give or take. I mean, a lot of it was field work too, but we didn't do anything all day. I mean, I was there for 8 hours, 9 hours. I didn't do anything. I was in the gym twice. I mean, it was pretty bad.
But you needed to come into the office, right? Like, I mean, like otherwise you're not a good employee. I mean, how crazy is that?
Yeah. And with all the rules we have now, with the 9 to 5 and all this other stuff, it's because one person breaks the rules. And that's just a sign of poor management when you treat everybody exactly the same, because everybody has their own thing. Like you can trust certain people to do certain things. You have to ride these people over here. And a lot of that comes from just that. And then of course, everybody guilts themselves into, like you just mentioned, I'm supposed to be up at the gym. Well, maybe you're not supposed to be up at the gym that early, or maybe you don't have to do this. And if you could convey that, which I guess is the biggest problem these days, is people feeling, or the whole guilt thing about, I got some extra time in the morning. Like the other day, I can't remember what day it was now. I was just exhausted. I could barely move. No particular reason, just kind of burning the candle at both ends. And I just laid in bed in the middle of the day for hours. And old me would have been like, you're wasting the day. You need to get up and do something. But I know better now, because I know this is going to make it worse. But that took a long time to come to that realization. Like, it's okay to just not do anything. And it's the middle of the workday, but who cares? Put your phone on do not disturb or whatever. And you feel like you're letting people down. You feel like you're letting yourself down. But like you just mentioned with the job, they're not thinking about you as much as you think that they are, provided you're hitting all your goals, your benchmarks, whatever your job is. It's not that big of a deal. But we just get in our own heads that we have to follow these rules of society, all that other stuff.
There's so much I want to say about this, but like, I mean, like and I know that you and I are speaking from a place of crazy levels of entitlement right now, right? Like, I mean, like it's very different if you're a person that has to take care of 3 kids and has to work a job that you're manning a cash register kind of thing. And so you have to be there because if you're not there, the cash register isn't manned. I get the fact that that isn't our lives. But the one thing I want to convey here is, as much as possible, you try and work towards your strengths. And at the same time, as you start working towards your strengths and as you start making these changes, you can actually start changing your life more so in terms of like, so maybe you're now working cash register and having to do all these things, but maybe your strengths are more about writing and you start writing a blog or something, and who knows where that goes. There's ways that you can start adapting your life to become bigger and bigger. But the other thing I wanted to say about this, and this actually happened today, I just had a client session earlier today where I had this client, and basically she's going through a lot of changes in her life right now. And from the outside, it's just so plainly obvious to see the fact that she's going through hell right now. It's very, very obvious. But in her mind, she's got the story of sitting there saying, but everything needs to be good. And if everything isn't good, I'm failing. And because of that story going on in her head, she's constantly criticizing herself, telling herself how bad she is, how that nothing is working out well for her. And she's going down this path of like, she's coming to see me because she's afraid that she's getting depressed. And I'm like, you are getting depressed, but it's because you're telling yourself how terrible you are as a human being. Of course, it's going to depress you. And so it was a big thing for her to like, it took a while for her to actually hear my words enough that it actually like really, really sunk in terms of the fact of you are telling yourself that it needs to be good, as opposed to just looking at reality and saying it is what it is and this too shall pass. And as soon as she like managed to wrap her head around that, you saw this element of just relief and release that happened inside of her as she finally said, okay, fine. Do you mean I don't need to live by that story? And this is the thing I want to bring it back to what we were talking about before, that you've got the story of I need to do things this way. And if I don't, then there's something wrong with me. I need to wake up at this time and I need to do that. And I'm guilty of it. I mean, like I'm telling you, I was a person that said, I've got to wake up at 4 a.m. because that's what you do if you want to be a fit biohacker. And I've got to work hard and I've got to and coffee with butter is the right thing to keep your nervous system going and everything. And I did all those things. And at some point in time, you just kind of realize the fact that when you really stop and listen to yourself and notice how much of this is story and how much of it is your body actually truly talking to you and telling you what works for you. If you just shut up inside of your head and listen, your body is so wise in telling you exactly what you need to know to make things work. If you just pay attention to the things that drive you, and I've said this to you so many times, if you just stubbornly refuse to be unhappy, and if you just force yourself to find where your happiness is, you're going to find that road that naturally leads you to, oh gosh, I want to do more of this. I want to be around those people. I want to be awake at these times. And I want to do these things. And at first, it may seem like it's so contradictory to everything that makes sense. And people might tell you you've changed so much. But that is the essence of human evolution movement. You are changing so much. Who in the world said that is so bad?
For sure. And usually the ones that have something to say are people that don't really care about you anyway, or they're just miserable in their own minds. And that goes across the board for a lot of things. I actually had a moment today that kind of reflects what you're saying. I got really tired after my little morning stretch of stuff. I got up, I went to the gym. And mind you, I'm getting up at 5 and I'm going to the gym and doing all these other things. But in my mind, because the workday starts at 8 or 9, whatever, I just count that time before the business day starts. I was like, oh, that doesn't count. Yeah, it counts. I was awake for 3 hours doing things. So then I get done with a bunch of shit this morning. I'm like, oh, I'm really, really tired, but I had like a bunch of stuff to do meeting wise and everything else after lunch. And I really, really wanted to go home and take a nap, and I didn't do it. I'm like, I forced myself to walk to the beach. That's why I'm pink again. But I went out and like walked to the beach and back, but I wasn't listening to my body at all. It was screaming, go rest, go lay down. And I kept telling myself like, no, I got to fight through this. And I went back to some previous life, where I was either in law enforcement or the military. And I'm like, you can fight through this. I'm like, well, I know I can. But like, why did I do this to myself? So it's just weird. Like, it's a daily thing where I do get very guilty if I have a couple of hours with nothing to do. And I'm like looking at my screen, I'm tinkering with ClickUp and all the little apps that we use. And I'm like, there has to be something in here I need to do. And then I'll just like fill that time with things where in fact, like, who says I can't go lay down for 2 hours? Like, why am I railing against everything just with the weight of it's a Monday or Tuesday. It's the middle of a work day, all the things you just said. And I know these things. Still do it anyway,
And it makes perfect sense. Like, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. There's that story in your head, and it's not a completely inaccurate story. And that's a challenge of it. It isn't completely inaccurate that you sit there saying, well, if I go lay down, I'm not going to be productive. And if I continue doing this, I'm going to be out of a job, right? Like, no one's going to want to work with me. And there's a truth to that. Like, if you become the laziest son of a bitch on the face of the planet, yes, I'm going to fire you. It's just what's going to happen. But the truth is, what really, really, really tends to happen is when you give yourself that permission and you re-energize, you come back as the greatest, grandest version of yourself, and you become even more productive. You come back and you've got more creativity inside of you, and you've given yourself what you need. And that to me is the thing that makes a difference. It's when you feed yourself correctly, you've got all the right resources to go out into this world and be amazingly powerful. That's the difference that makes a difference. Now, at first, there's also that concept of you have to sometimes break the pattern and the habit of what's going on. Like, for example, it's sometimes very hard if you haven't exercised for the last 6 months to get your butt into the gym the very first time. And every single time you're going to tell yourself, do you know what? Like, it's not today. But that's where the concept of making it easy and creating a habit for yourself works, where you just try something at the beginning and you make it as comfortable for yourself as possible and as easy for yourself as possible. And you say, I'm going to try this for 10 days. If at the end of the 10 days, it is absolutely hellacious, I'll come up with something else. But what happens is once you start the pattern, something inside of yourself is actually going to sit there going, do you know what? I kind of like this. And at the end of the 10 days, it may not be really enjoyable, but something inside of yourself says, I don't mind trying this for a bit longer. This doesn't feel like I'm going completely against myself. It just feels like it's difficult at the beginning. Sorry, yeah?
Oh, well, then you get consistency as well. So if you're somebody who doesn't go to the gym and you go for 10 days, and I love that James Clear story where the guy needs to start going to the gym. So he sets his alarm the first morning for a few days, doesn't even get out of bed. The next few days after that, he gets up, puts his shoes on, goes downstairs. Then he goes back up to bed. And then after that, he drives to the gym and sits in the parking lot, but doesn't go in. And then after that, he goes in, does a lap and leaves. Now that's an extreme example, but because he never missed a day. And I kind of subscribe to that too. I go to the gym every day for consistency. Some days I go in there and I'm like, I look around, I'm like, all right, I'm going to get on the stair climber for 5 minutes, then I'm out of here. But it does make me feel better because I'm there. It's when you miss a lot of days in a row, at least for me, that's when it really, really like starts to bother me. So yeah, that totally works.
It is very, very tough to do because I mean, there is that part inside of you that just has the habit of just being lazy, right? And it's very easy, but that does have with it just the consequences associated with it. But you say that it's a crazy story, but I'll tell you from my own personal life, that is exactly what I did for a while. I told myself I'm going to gym every single day, but there were days I went to gym and I did nothing besides stretch. Just because I liked it, I stretched and I looked at hot girls. That was just my happy time at gym, and it was good. And then I would notice one hot girl and I'm like, she's seen me stretch for too long right now. Maybe I'm just going to do some push-ups in front of her. And before I knew it, I'm working out, right? But you start the habit in whatever way works for you. And I love that idea of you set an alarm clock, and if the alarm clock goes off and you just turn it off, at least you set the alarm clock and you turned it off. That is something. It's just moving into that place of starting to take something new and telling yourself that something is different.
And you don't have to start on Mondays either. People make that mistake all the time. I'm going to start a new habit on a Monday. That's the worst day to start because typically all the shit comes rolling in from the weekend. Whatever business you're in, whatever job you have, Mondays are usually the worst, period. There's argument to be made about some type of retail may be busier on the weekends. But for the most part, things are bad on Mondays. I go into Mondays, I don't have a lot on my calendar. All of a sudden, things start showing up. It's just the way the world works. But I've actually thought of or started applying this to other things as well. Like talking about writing, for example. I'm trying to work my way through some stuff with writing, getting up, going to the gym, setting the alarm, going in there, whatever, whether you do anything or not. There's that. But I think people get too fixated on rituals as well. So I used to be the type of person, I can't sit down and write anything unless everything is just right. I got my little water bottle over here. I got my glasses. Everything's laid out right. And I was listening to some show and somebody was like, I did that for the longest time. And then you're procrastinating is all you're doing. You're just not getting it done. Just learn to drop into it anywhere. Like you're sitting in the back of an Uber, write something like that. So we also get in our own way there. We want all perfect conditions all the time for everything. And that's just not going to fucking happen, man.
So I'm going to pull up something right now.
For ourselves are always so much better than the words we write for others. Well, sit. Go ahead.
Go ahead and what?
Write.
What are you doing?
I'm writing. Like you'll be when you start punching those keys. Is there a problem?
No, I'm just thinking.
No. No thinking. That comes later. You write your first draft with your heart. And you rewrite with your head. first key to writing is to write, not to think.
That's all that matters. And that's what I would tell myself. And what happens is, as you start typing, you get into that momentum, and the first 3 paragraphs are throwaway paragraphs. But before you know it, you're actually writing something good. And it's not about creating the perfect environment. It's not about having the muse or anything else. It's as soon as you get into that pattern of doing something and writing, everything happens after that. And that is just one example of it. It's the exact same thing as going to the gym and stretch. Just be in the gym. If you want to exercise, be in the gym. It's not about lifting up the weights. What will happen is you're going to be in the gym, you're going to stretch, you're going to look at people, whatever it is. Before you know it, I think I could lift that weight as much as that guy is. Like, let me give that a try. It's the exact same thing with writing, right? I mean, for you in the example, in terms of like, you could set up the perfect environment and have everything right and wait for the muse to strike and wait for God to throw down lightning bolts of inspiration. Or you can just sit in front of your laptop and start writing, knowing that the first 5 minutes of writing are going to be crap. But as soon as that's out of you, you're in the momentum and everything changes from there.
And this goes back to your social media point about what we're comparing ourselves to. Like, you're comparing yourself to the person who's been in the gym. That's all that person does. They're a fitness model. That's all they do is they work out hard. Or like a famous author. Then, you know, if people actually went back and saw the stories, like Stephen King would write just like 4 or 5 terrible drafts before he would will it down. But we're only seeing the finished product. You're only seeing the outcome. So we compare ourselves to that. What's the saying? Like, don't compare your beginning to somebody else's success or like midpoint or something like that. Same thing. It's tough to do. But yeah, just sitting down and doing it. People are so willing to put like effort into what other people have going on, like pour themselves into work. And maybe this is a generational thing because the last so many years, like the big thing was make more money, take care of your family, everything else. But man, isn't it ever hard to get people to spend more time on themselves? If I had an extra 20 minutes of my day, I should be doing my yoga or something else. And I'll be like, oh, but I got to go finish something with business. And I don't know if that's just a universal human condition or if it's something that we've got going on here in the States.
I think I heard this from Chris, God's sakes, I always get his name. Chris Willix, is it? The Modern Wisdom?
Chris Williamson.
Chris Williamson. He talks about, the first time I ever heard about it, but he actually got it from someone else, is productivity debt. And he talks about the fact that like every single day that you wake up, there's something inside of you that feels like if I'm not productive today, I'm losing out on something. It's just that debt that you have that society has imprinted upon you, sitting there saying that you wake up every day in the red and you've got to work your way up to get into the black. And it's a crazy thing that just modern day society has created upon you. And your idea of taking time to spend time on yourself seems insane when you're still at a debt right now and you still have like these people that you owe productivity to. But it's just a story created by society. Again, it goes against everything that we talk about in human evolution movement, where the real idea is to just sit there saying, these are the crazy stories that everyone is feeding into me, that I've got to do all these things. Otherwise, I'm not a healthy individual. As opposed to sit there saying, the truth is, what I need to do is focus in on myself, make myself a healthy individual. And then when I put stuff out into the world, it's going to be stuff that makes a difference. So I get it. I mean, it's not to say that I'm great at this, but I do feel like because I've really taken on this philosophy that's made a big change in my life, that for me, working on myself has become my number one thing. After that, after I care for myself and I feel good, comes the idea of being productive, etc. But I'm talking from a place of absolute entitlement here, where I've created a life for myself that allows for that. So I get that too.
I used to work with this guy who was single, and he would have a lot of dates lined up for the week in my old job. We met some of the women that would come around the office or whatever, and they would say, hey, we going out, when are we doing happy hour? He's like, well, I'm going to go to the gym. And they would be upset. Like, well, what do you want me to do? Go wait at the bar or something? And he would say, listen, your relationships and all these other things are temporary. I have this body for the rest of my life. So you would think that would be the first thing we put our effort and attention in, whether it's nutrition or exercise. Like number one would be like, I'm checking all my self-care boxes today, whether it's exercise, nutrition, sleep, whatever it is. Then we would make other things secondary.
And it's crazy to me, but that makes perfect sense. And that to me is exactly what the human evolution movement is all about. It's about actually understanding the fact that not only do you have space on the totem pole, but you belong at the top of the totem pole. That the very first thing that matters is self-love and self-care. And then after that comes caring for others. And it's such a difficult thing because society has created this terrible label called selfishness, where they say, like, if you're doing this, you're being terribly selfish. And the thing I want you to understand is being selfish is the healthiest thing you can do for others. And I know we've discussed this before, but there's that concept of being on an airplane, and it's just the most overused kind of story. But like, they always say, like, I mean, in case of loss of cabin pressure, put the gas mask on yourself, then put it on others. But society sits there telling you, no, 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 no. What you do is make sure that everyone else can breathe and you hold your breath. How in the world does that work? It's like, I mean, you managed to put a gas mask on 3 other people before you faint and then eventually die. Or do you put the gas mask on yourself? You're now capable of breathing. They fainted, but now because you can breathe, you've got the time to sit there going, and now I got you, and I got you, and I got you, and everyone's going to be fine. It makes perfect sense. It's just, it goes against the way society has created things in terms of productivity debt, right? You have to be productive in this society. Otherwise, you're not a real functional, healthy member.
If you don't take care of yourself, you end up becoming a burden on society and the rest of us anyway. And that applies to everybody. Like if I don't take care of myself and I get it up into my 80s, 90s, whatever age I end up living to, and I'm a burden on the people around me, family. So really we would all do well if everybody would take care of themselves first. I mean, look, some people get diagnosed with things they have out of their hands. We would be doing much better as a society, I think, if people would take care of themselves and then worry about everybody else around them. But nope.
You have no clue. And I don't think I think that is a very accurate statement. And I mean, unfortunately, you see it with aging parents, you see it as you age yourself. The fact that the people that don't take care of themselves, basically what they're doing is that they're setting you up. If it's a loved one for you, they're setting you up for having to take care of them when they're older. And it's not something that you do unwillingly. I know we've obviously discussed this about my father, etc. It's not something that you don't want to do. But at the same time, like if they took better care of themselves mentally and physically, then maybe you'll still have to take care of them, but at least they will have the most happy, healthy, productive end of life as possible. So taking care of yourself is actually the best thing you can do for people moving forward through time. But no one ever looks at it from that point of view. You're 100% right.
And plus it's uncomfortable, right? I don't necessarily want people taking care of me if I can. I mean, who does? But yeah, just the uncomfortableness of that. But of course, when we're feeling okay, we don't think about stuff like that. But all the little things that go into your physical health, your mental health, giving yourself a pat on the back for accomplishing what you did during the day versus, oh, I was supposed to do this much. Like I'm breaking even, like you said, with the deficit or whatever, like the debt. I'm supposed to do this much. I don't deserve. Like, well, maybe you did a lot of work today and you deserve it. So it takes a lot, though. It takes a lot of mindset shifts.
I remember in Arkansas that I actually gave Brittany this exact story. And it was just like a big thing for me in terms of the fact that like when I was young, and I told you I did martial arts for most of my life, and I did all the crazy. It's called wushu, so it's all the acrobatic martial arts, and you're doing flips and everything else. And I mean, I would land so badly, and I would twist my ankle, and I'd be like, "It's okay, like rub some dirt on it, and everything will be okay," kind of thing. Or I'd land straight on my coccyx, and I'd be like, "Oh my god, I think maybe it's," but you know what? I'm gonna be okay. Like all that kind of crazy stuff. And when you're young and you've got all those stem cells running through your system, everything is wonderful, right? But then all of a sudden, like when I just hit my 40s, and all of a sudden, like it's everything in your body starts creaking, and you're going like, maybe I should have bent my knees when I landed instead of trying to land that perfect landing with straight legs the whole way through. And so the thing is, it's not something that happens to you when you're 90. It's like something that very much you can actually. I wish that right now I could just go and whisper in younger me's ear and sit there saying like, you don't need to be the crazy daredevil. Like still do everything you want to do. I want you to have as much fun as possible. But just at the same time, you don't need to go absolutely crazy about this. And you can still get everything you want done. And you're going to be much happier when you come to my age. But right now I look at that kid and I'm like, I want to bitch slap you for the fact that you didn't take better care of yourself, but he didn't know any better. But the whole thing, the reason why I'm bringing that up is right now, as you listen to this, myself included, you included, every other person included, it's like the you from 40 years time is going to want to whisper certain things in your ear. And this is your moment right now to really listen to it, as much as I just really want you to get this idea in your head of how badly I want to scream in that child's ear, like, don't be that crazy. Like, it's have fun, do everything. But you being that crazy doesn't really add to your quality of life. And trust me, it really reduces for mine. It's like the you from 40 years time is going to want to say the same things to you today.
Yeah, I think Alex Hormozy does this thing where he'll, not every day, but he'll get up on some mornings, he'll sit in bed and visualize, what is this going to feel like when I'm 80? Like what's not going to feel good? Like, am I going to have chronic pain? Am I going to have a hard time getting up? Like now that's hard to do when you don't have those things, but he actually takes the time. It's like a little meditation he does. Like I need to be careful what I'm doing now. Because again, like in retrospect, we could always look back on our 20s, 30s, whatever, in teen years and like, you should do this, shouldn't do that. What we should be doing, like you just mentioned, is thinking ahead to what would that person say to us now? Like what would, there's another thing Chris Williamson says, what would tomorrow you want you today to do? I use that a lot when I'm like reaching for a beer or a candy bar or something like that,
Yeah,
because you're just stealing whatever, you're stealing happiness from the future, man.
Yeah, and that it's, I mean, I'm not really sharing my poster, whatever it is, but on my poster with my affirmations, like one of the biggest questions I got there is, what would that Ori do? And what I mean by that is like it's always right in front of my face as I think about it, because I always want to really ask myself, like the one that does care for himself, would he be doing the same things I do? The one that really wants to have that life that I've created, that is really moving towards that life, what would he be doing right now? And I've made that into one of the primary questions of my life because I've discovered that that completely guides everything for me. And so you talk about Alex Hormozy doing it, but like it's a very, very simple thing to do. When you really stay quiet for a moment, you listen to your body, you know that what you're doing is possibly a bit crazy or stupid. You just don't want to listen to it right now because it's easier not to. And by all means, go ahead and do it. But just keep that extra thought in your head of, what would the you that really cares for your future do? And just know the contrast of the two. That's a great place to start. Do everything you want to do, but at least be aware of the contrast. And then with time, you're going to notice, you know what, today I'm just going to do one thing differently. Just one. And allow that to start growing. The exact same thing as going to the gym and starting off. It just means setting the alarm clock for the right time.
Love, that's well said. People walking behind me, of course. Hopefully they got food. Are they bringing food to co-working? Speaking of being able to control myself, they're probably showing up with a cake or something like that. I'm going to go out there and dig into it. But yeah, a lot of great advice, small changes, build small habits at a time. Think about what you in the future would want you today to do. What would that Ori do? What would that Lee do? What would whoever's listening to this, what would that person do? And I think that's just great advice, because I use that on a daily basis where I'm like, what would tomorrow me want today to do about this? Would he want me to pig out on these brownies? Now, that's not to say I don't treat myself sometimes. And usually the answer is maybe not. And it doesn't stop me from doing bad things all the time, but it significantly cuts down on those things.
It's just making those small shifts. It's exactly like you just said. And they build up over time. And that's all that matters. Like, it's like, as long as you're moving in the right direction, you're not moving in the wrong direction. That's a great move.
Thanks everybody for being here. Please like and subscribe. We do appreciate everybody listening, and we will have some content coming out even over the holidays. And we got some new things in the works that we were able to drum up in our trip in Arkansas that we will be posting and sharing to everybody. So again, we appreciate it. Thanks everybody, and to be continued.
Love you guys. Thanks, Lee.
Hey everyone, it's Lee. Just one more thing before you go. Ever wondered how journaling could help change your life? You can find out by downloading the Emotional Alchemy Journal from the link in the description. It's a powerful tool for deep self-reflection, and it's completely free. And if you're looking to connect with Ori and learn more about how he can help you, visit his website at OriGoldstein.com. A link will also be in the description. Until next time, keep challenging the chaos within, be a little kinder to yourself, and let's continue to evolve together.